Hi, I'm Varun Haran. I'm Managing Director for Asia and Middle East with Information Security Media Group. I'm speaking with Leah MacMillan, who is the CMO for Trend Micro. It's my pleasure to be talking to her about visibility detection and response in the current threat landscape. Hi, Leah. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Varun. Nice to be here.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Leah, based on your research, how is the evolving threat landscape impacting enterprises' abilities to meaningfully address issues around visibility, detection, and response?
You know, it's interesting. Over the years, I think one of the things we've seen is that the threat landscape very closely mirrors what we see happening in the infrastructure landscape. So as our infrastructure continues to evolve and expand, we're seeing the nature of the threats change as well. Cyber criminals are taking advantage of all the new vulnerabilities that we've introduced in our new and old systems, and are taking advantage of that expanded attack surface.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of it relates back to that digital transformation that organizations are doing, moving to the cloud, whether that's migrating workloads to AWS or Google or Azure,
Right.
whether they're doing Office 365, or whether they're extending their networks and their users are becoming more mobile. There's just such an expanded attack surface now.
And there's a lot of activity happening in the space which was piecemeal and fragmented before, but now there's a real push for that digital transformation to go through. In fact, most organizations like to identify themselves as cloud first and other such labels. But what do you think are some of the specific challenges that you can share with me around visibility, detection, and response?
Yeah, I think one thing that's important to remember is that we're still seeing over 90% of threats coming in over email. Right, that continues to be the number one attack vector. Obviously, phishing attacks continue to be a nuisance, and we're seeing increasingly sophisticated attacks over email, like business email compromise, where they're spoofing the CEO, moving down through the organization, and really having some great success. We're also seeing, though, an increase in threats that are harder to detect. So not just relying on attachments to email, but fileless threats. Last year we blocked 1.4 million fileless events. And ransomware, of course, continues to be, 10% increase last year, continues to be an issue, especially targeting organizations that are at risk of great service loss, healthcare organizations, government agencies, and so on. So those are some of the specific threats that we're seeing. But certainly the biggest transformation is what's happening in the cloud. And with DevOps becoming really the way of delivering applications now, we're seeing new vulnerabilities, misconfigurations in the cloud that organizations are scrambling to deal with.
Right. So I think the security community likes to take pride in the idea that there's a lot of maturity that is happening, but just referencing what we discussed a minute back, if you look at the threat landscape as well, across the spectrum there is maturity happening. If you take ransomware to all the way across to your nation-state threats and zero-day attacks, etc. What are some recommendations you can share with practitioners, with CISOs, to deal with the current landscape?
Well, I think, if we bring it back to what we see as the biggest challenges that CISOs are facing, I think, there's three big things. One is that today, as you say, we have a lot of technology that we're trying to use to combat the bad guys. And the average organization probably has over 25 different security tools that they're trying to manage. So what we hear from CISOs is what they'd really like to do is to find a way to consolidate that. They are trying to do some vendor consolidation and find tools that work together and share threat intelligence and more of a connected threat defense, if you will. Another big challenge they're facing is just the number of people that they have to deal with, managing all of those tools, patching all of the vulnerabilities and the systems. And so they're looking for something that's more automated, where data can be correlated, and using big data and AI to correlate all the data and events that they're seeing across the system. That's something that people are really looking for. And I think that's where, it comes into, what we do in terms of things like EDR and moving beyond EDR to what we call XDR,
right.
Being able to see across the environment.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. So my last question to you was going to be about EDR, right? Mm-hmm. So when you talk about visibility, detection, and response, especially on the endpoint, EDR is where it's at. But it's not easy, it's not for everybody. It's not something that every organization is able to successfully achieve. So what is the state of EDR right now? And how can organizations use it more effectively?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a couple of things. Certainly EDR has been the trend over the last few years, and as you know, it isn't always the easiest for all organizations to embrace. So a couple key things are happening. One is that we have found that detection and response needs to move beyond the endpoint. If you're only looking at what happened on the endpoint, you're missing some of the key context. Where was the actual root cause? How did it come in through the email? How did that malware actually go from a developer machine up to the cloud? How did that information get over into your operational technology and devices? So you need to move beyond the endpoint. And so we're seeing a need or a trend now to extend beyond the endpoint across the different threat vectors that we see and have collective correlated information across the extended environment. The other thing, though, is that managed services are becoming increasingly important. So we're seeing a huge uptake, for example, in a managed XDR service. For that reason, that not everyone can be a threat expert and can monitor and manage that information that they're seeing. And so a managed service is a good way for organizations to go to help them essentially augment their SOC or their SOC-like activities that they have.
Right. So what I'm understanding from what you're saying, XDR essentially covers not only managed detection and response, but also across the spectrum from IT to OT and all other connected
email,
environments.
endpoint, network, cloud, data center, ultimately IoT. All of these things need to have connected visibility so that you can really see across the whole extended enterprise and respond more quickly with greater context and information.
Excellent. Thank you, Leah, so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for everyone. It was lovely.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
That's Leah MacMillan, who is CMO with Trend Micro. For ISMG, this is Varun Haran. Thanks for watching.